Shay Cells, I'm sure you guys have heard the term, time heals all wounds. But what they don't tell you is, time can leave the nastiest scars. And Charles lost to Arman Tsarukyan. It's definitely left a scar. You know, it has left a scar in my psyche that I'm not sure will ever get fixed. And you know, I'm okay with living with that, honestly. But what I think would be best for me is to move forward. Put the past in the past and just move on. You know, I think moving on is definitely the first step in healing. So I think that's what we're going to do today. And to start that off, we're going to go back and re-talk about Arman Tsarukyan's fight against Charles Oliveira. In the recap video I posted for the fight, I made a very clear, concise, well-backed claim that Charles Oliveira should have won that fight. You know, I never said it was a robbery. The fight was not a robbery. It was very close. But per the judging criteria, Charles Oliveira won that fight. And you know, there was definitely a lot of pushback on that video. A lot of people were saying that I was wrong. Some people were saying that I was delusional. A lot of people were commenting, cope, LOL, this is just cope. Which, you know, usually this is all fine. But I was just very surprised because, you know, I was receiving a good amount of these comments. I was just waiting for somebody to actually leave an argument that refuted the things that I was saying, for someone to lay out exactly why I was wrong, but it never came. Here's what everything pretty much boiled down to. This right here is the judging criteria. I recommend everybody to pause the video and read it, because some people were making claims that damage is way more important than unsuccessful submission attempts, which, you know, that claim on its own isn't entirely wrong. You know, it's very dependent on what kind of damage you're talking about and what kind of failed submission you're talking about. The criteria itself does not say inherently that damage is more significant than submissions. It doesn't say that. It says effective striking / grappling. Not effective striking and then grappling. Not number 1 effective striking, enter key, comma, 2 effective grappling. No, it says /. And the second big thing you gotta understand is what the judges are supposed to judge is things that happen in the fight that contribute to the potential end of the fight, with the immediate weighing way more than cumulative. To give an example, let's say somebody lands 10 jabs that pops their opponent's head back. Those jabs have the potential to end the fight, so they are scored as effective striking. But then after he lands those 10 jabs, his opponent loads up on a huge overhand, lands it flush, he gets dropped bad, but he barely survives to the next round. That had a much more immediate impact to ending the fight than those jabs did. But again, the number 1 criteria is effective striking / grappling. So you can't inherently give an advantage to one or the other. It's just dependent on how much it contributed to ending the fight. So we look at round 1. Charles had that really tight guillotine. You see Arman's face turning red. He had to completely turn to his back to get out of it, which left him underneath mount. And a small detail that just in this entire madness of this fight, I never even noticed, was that the reason why Charles lost the guillotine was because Arman's shorts were sliding off, his legs went with it.
Arman Tsarukyan's shorts were on perfectly loose. So when Oliveira had the Arman guillotine here, locked in, closed guard, one of his specials, he's stretching on the squeeze, and his legs, the sweat plus the loose shorts, sliding down. Tsarukyan's pants fell off mid-fight, his fully exposing his butt to the crowd right here.
Which, you know, unfortunate, but that kind of thing is going to happen. But eventually Arman bucks, ends up on top, and he does land some light ground and pound here and there. But without a doubt, the closest thing that contributed to the potential end of the fight was that guillotine. I mean, there is no question about that. So round 1 goes to Charles. Round 2, of course, 100% goes to Arman. Charles did land a really good straight right that kind of stumbled Arman, but I said this in the breakdown video, Charles has a terrible habit of trying to play full guard with his head pressed up against the fence. I mean, that is the last place you want to be doing jiu-jitsu. because you just don't have the mobility to move and throw up submissions and just change angles because you're trapped. And Arman, already being the jacked hamster that he is really tough to submit from full guard. But with your head pressed up against the fence, that's bad. No, that terrible, terrible, terrible. And he ate some monster elbows. So 100% round 2 goes to Arman. It's 1-1. So now we look at round 3. The fight starts on the feet, and Arman overall lands more significant strikes while they were standing. This is something some people were commenting about. They were like, Arman definitely won round 3 because the significant strikes was like 5-13 or something like that. First off, a blocked kick is a significant strike, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you caused damage that could lead to the end of the fight, because nothing significant landed on the feet. Almost all of Arman's strikes were partially blocked. And Charles landed some good strikes of his own. But still, if all we were judging that round on was that standing portion, yes, you give it to Arman. But eventually, Tsarukyan gets a takedown, and he does 0 damage. He does not do any damage at all. And per the judging criteria, as it states right here, a takedown that just changes position is not counted as effective grappling. You must establish an attack with the takedown. Top and bottom position fighters are assessed on the impactful/effective result of their actions, more so than their position, which Arman didn't do. He tried taking Charles's back, but he couldn't do it. He did end up in side control for a little while, but he again didn't do any damage at all. And with 40 seconds left, Charles changes position, ends up on top, and begins attacking with submissions. And at 29 seconds, he locks in the Darce. Like I had said at the time, the Darce wasn't in the perfect position to finish, but where they were at, you can absolutely get a submission from there. When you're looking at a world-class grappler who specializes in that submission, without a doubt, you can finish it from there. If Arman's left arm was reaching around Charles's body, then I would tell you that Darce was not in. No shot he would have been able to finish it. But it wasn't. Arman's arm was on the inside, meaning his own shoulder was pushing into his throat, and he was definitely getting choked. He tried to defend it by flattening out. So I really, really want to understand, how was that not clearly 100% the closest thing that contributed to ending the fight? It's lunacy to me how so many people were just like, no, you're wrong, because Arman controlled him from on top for like a good couple minutes before that. That is irrelevant to the judging criteria. I do not understand where people are getting this from. No, actually, I think I do understand. I think people realize what the scoring criteria says, but I think they just don't like it, and because they're not happy about it, they're just saying no. But it doesn't matter what you like. It doesn't matter what I like. This is the scoring criteria we're supposed to follow. And in the third round, the only significant thing that contributed to the potential end of the fight was that Darce choke. There is no question that Charles should have won this fight. Sure, if Arman cracked Charles and dropped him in that round, then, yeah, you would say that was the closest thing that could have ended the fight. But it didn't happen. Again, this fight was not a robbery. It was super, super close, but per the scoring criteria, which the judges are supposed to follow, there is no argument against Charles winning this fight. If you have one, I would love to hear it. But okay, I am now officially ready to move on, all right? Okay, that's all in the past now. What is next for Charles? That is the big question. Well, of course, a 5-round rematch between him and Arman would be pretty cool, but I'll be honest, I actually would really like to see Arman fight Islam. Clearly he's not going to be the favorite, but I would love to see that fight, so I'm cool with it. And I think there are some other really good fights for Charles to take. My number 1 choice for sure would have been a quick turnaround between Charles and Justin Gaethje. I think that really suits both of them really well. But, Gaethje is probably going to come out with some excuse that he needs a little bit of time before his little knockout, so that fight probably won't happen. So, looking at the rankings, the most likely next opponent is probably going to be Gamrot, which, I don't have a problem with that. Gamrot is without a doubt the best wrestler at lightweight. As far as the wrestling exchanges goes, he edged out Arman. But stylistically, what makes this matchup interesting is that Gamrot comes from freestyle wrestling. As far as getting takedowns and ending up on top, like I said, he is the best in the division. But when it comes to actually fighting on the ground, he's definitely very lacking. And I think his fight with Jalen Turner highlights this the best. We recently just saw Jalen fight somebody who is a specialist on the ground in Renato Moicano, and he could not get up or do anything. But against Gamrot, there were plenty of opportunities where he was able to work himself up against the fence and build the base back up. And that's pretty much because Gamrot just would kind of grab a body lock and then hold on for dear life. As I've discussed before, as a freestyle wrestler, pins are not his strong suit. And another area I do think Gamrot struggles with is the striking. Now, he's not a bad striker by any means, but he has trouble gaining respect with his striking. And because of that, his opponents are very ready for him to shoot. So on the feet, of course, you're gonna give Charles an advantage, but as we saw in his fight against Arman, because Charles likes to pressure so much, it does open up the takedown. And Gamrot actually competed in the 2019 ADCC World Championships, like the most prestigious Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament there is. But what is important to understand about that is wrestling is a huge part of the ADCC rule set, which is why Gamrot was able to win the trials and compete at the tournament. But, as far as stacking up his jiu-jitsu against guys like Charles Oliveira, I would say he's not quite up to par, as Beneil Dariush proved to be the better submission grappler than Gamrot. But still, it's Gamrot's ability to scramble that makes me want to see how he deals with Oliveira's submission attacks. Gamrot, the second he is in trouble on the ground, the second you're about to get a reversal, the second you grab a submission, he is moving a million miles per second. And given the fact Charles will really take his time working on the ground, even if his head is pressed into the fence from full guard, which I really do not like, I think it'll be really interesting to see. The other possible fight for Charles that I really want to see, going through these rankings, a lot of guys are not available, but I brought him up earlier. Renato Moicano would be such a sick fight. Against Jalen Turner, he actually really surprised me. I knew on the feet he would definitely be outclassed. But I knew if he got Jalen to the ground, he was definitely in trouble. But I really did not expect him to find those clinch takedowns as easily as he did. When you go for takedowns like those, your length and your leverage plays a huge role in whether or not you can complete the takedown. That's why Drew Dober was practically helpless in stopping those kind of takedowns, but Jalen Turner, being so much taller and having such a huge reach advantage, on paper you would say those kinds of takedowns are going to be very difficult to complete against him, but Renato, he got it done, and he looked very strong in the clinch. The best aspect of his game by far is how quickly he can take your back and how fast he sinks in the rear naked choke. It does not matter how good you are, you give him that opening, you are in serious trouble. Both Charles and Moicano both are really high level in jiu-jitsu, but Moicano fights a bit more traditional. He doesn't like to play off his back, he likes to be the guy on top, and he does not risk his position for subs. He'd much rather try to maintain, pass your guard, land ground and pound. Whereas, of course, Charles will concede to fight off his back. So Moicano is going to 100% look for those clinch takedowns, which is a very safe way to get the fight to the ground without risking getting guillotined. But like I said, Charles will gladly take bottom position, and it'll be very interesting to see how the scrambles look off the submission attempts. But even on the feet, the fight is very interesting as well. You have to give the edge to Charles, but Moicano, he fights very defensively sound. He stays behind his jab. He's really good at mixing in kicks with his combinations. And just like with Gamrot, if Charles really tries to pressure him, he's going to gladly look for the takedown. So honestly, as far as fights I want to see for Charles, I got to put Renato Moicano as my first choice. Though most likely they'll probably go with Gamrot, which is another great fight. But as far as guys who are available at lightweight, it's really only those two.